Hello, 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 ho, ho, ho. Welcome, everybody, to Zoobox's 12 Days of Christmas Movies. That's right. From today all the way up until Christmas Day, we'll be talking about Christmas movies, all sorts of Christmas movies. Some heterodox, some the staples. We're going to go through them all. Maybe some few surprises in there. Who knows? Maybe we'll talk about Die Hard. Maybe it would be one of those fucking people. You know those fucking people? I do. I know them. I might be one of them. It's weird. I don't really think of Die Hard as necessarily a Christmas movie, even though it takes place on Christmas, but I do end up watching it around this time of year. That's just when it's kind of in the old movie watching rotation. But today we're going to be talking about another 80s classic. You know it. You love it. 1984's Gremlins. The film is directed by Joe Dante, written by Chris Columbus. It stars Zach Gilligan, Phoebe Cates, Hoyt Axton, Corey Feldman, Dick Miller, Polly Holiday, and others. The logline plot synopsis is: a boy inadvertently breaks 3 important rules concerning his new pet and unleashes a horde of malevolently mischievous monsters on a small town. Now, is this a movie that people would take issue with? Including it in a Christmas, like a list of Christmas movies? I don't know. In my opinion, I think Gremlins is pretty explicitly Christmas. Because it is kind of all about giving and remembering. It explores a little bit the darker side of Christmas, if you will. Not just the mischievous gremlins, which are kind of the antithesis of the season. So it kind of gives our heroes like a direct metaphor to fight against, right? Because the gremlins are all like awful, hyper consumeristic, selfish, self-involved. The survival ethic is alive and well in the gremlin. And the whole little town, this idyllic little Frank Capra-esque town, has to deal with them. One of the cool things about this movie, it is kind of like this bizarro Frank Capra thing. Joe Dante, he's the kind of guy, especially nowadays, now in his older years, he spends a lot of time talking about old movies. He has even a channel on YouTube called Trailers from Hell, where they discuss like trailers of older movies, and they'll go down and give a little commentary on them, talk about their history with them, why they think they're important movies. So he's a very well-versed person in film. And I can only imagine. I don't know this for sure. I've never listened to Gremlins with commentary or whatever, although I want to. I actually have this 3-pack here. Now, this is actually a pretty good 3-pack. This is back in kind of the earlier days of Blu-ray. I got that for like $10. Long time ago. Anyways, so it would not surprise me to find out that Dante was probably making direct references to Frank Capra's classic, It's a Wonderful Life, especially in some of the small town politics that are going on. There's, what's her name? Miss Deedle? Is that her name? Ruby Deagle. Sorry, my bad. Miss Deagle, she's kind of like a Mr. Potter, This awful Christmas Grinch of a woman. But, so it's kind of has that air to it, and it feels to me like it explicitly starts as a Christmas movie. It even has Christmas music, and people are buying Christmas trees, and you're kind of invited into this small idyllic town. A nice, cool little piece of trivia: the town that they shot Gremlins is the same one they built for Back to the Future. So that's why it kind of like rings really true. Maybe that's why it feels so familiar, and it screams kind of like Americana. It feels explicitly kind of Western in that way. And I've always really loved Gremlins. It's never something that's been on my like top 10 or anything like that over the years. Although having watched it this viewing of the film, I came to really, really respect and appreciate it. It's a very well modulated movie because it's doing everything. It's got a holiday theme. It's funny. It's legitimately kind of creepy and gross out at times. It's got a nice little message to it. Also has kind of like this dark, black, cynical heart to it. Which is where a lot of the comedy is mined from. So you could consider it kind of a black comedy, if you will, a dark comedy. and it just goes to the races with it all, and it successfully executes on all of them and balances them all. Because it's one of these 80s movies, these kind of like 80s family films that actually has a darker edge to it. I mean, there is kind of the sense that it is about failure and life and trying to live by your principles. That's why I kind of made mention of like Frank Capra stuff before, because it definitely echoes a lot of that stuff. If you look at Zach Gilligan's character, Billy, make sure that's his name, Billy. Like he is a kind of a Jimmy Stewart-esque character. He's kind of stuck there and he feels obligated and loyal to his parents. He's trying to get by. He works at the local bank. A lot of cool stuff like that. A lot of cool things like that. But everybody knows Gremlins mostly because of the Gremlins themselves. The great puppet work done back in the day. I mean, it holds up to this day. It's so impressive. Like the makeup they did and the animatronics and just the puppeteering. I mean, they knock it out of the park. It's a movie that has its verisimilitude straight. You don't ever feel like the universe breaks. You always feel like it is of the piece, of the same thing. There's one moment in the movie where I think some people criticize it for where it gets like too dark. You know, Phoebe Cates' character, Billy's love interest, Zach Gilligan's love interest, she doesn't like Christmas for some reason. She doesn't like to celebrate the holiday. And there's this really actually dramatic and heartbreaking story that she tells about how her father died while dressed up like Santa Claus, trying to pretend to like be Santa Claus on Christmas Eve and come down the chimney with all these presents. And then he slips and breaks his fucking neck. And they find him like a few days later. Very dark. Apparently even Steven Spielberg, who's the producer on this movie, and he was famously at the time a very hands-on producer, really wanted Dante to cut it. And the studio was behind him. He was behind them cutting that scene out of the movie. But Dante just felt like it was important because he wanted to reflect this kind of greater reality about the holiday season and how different people perceive the holiday season. And because the whole town kind of runs the gamut of people that think about it in a different way, right? There's the more traditional kind of view on it. That's what you get from Billy and his family and his dad especially. Hoyt Axton. As the dad, Randall. Like, they're the more traditional kind of American family. They have kind of these very traditional American values. And then you have like kind of their neighbors, Dick Miller, who's kind of like the grumpy old man, but still very like America-centric. He keeps talking about his plow tractor. It's like, oh, that's from Kentucky Ridge. Those things are built to last, my friend. American ingenuity, you know. A lot of fun stuff like that in the movie. And then you have like Mrs. Deagle, who's obviously, you know, Mr. Potter, the Ebenezer Scrooge, the Grinch, who just looks at it as this great kind of consumerist holiday, this great corporatist holiday. It's actually funny that she gets her due in this movie. Because like the way she gets, you know, her due with her, like she's got one of those chairs that goes up the stairs, that assists you to go up the stairs, and the gremlins go in and they monkey with the wires and shoots her out the fucking window. I mean, this is a PG kids movie. And the movie has tons of moments like that. You know, there's tons of moments with like all the gremlins. I guess you could say probably the moment in the movie that almost you could say goes too far, almost breaks the movie, breaks the tone of the movie, is when all the gremlins are in the bar and they're all like dressed up as humans. You got like a noir detective dude, and they're all smoking cigarettes and drinking beer, but for some reason, I don't know why, I feel like the movie kind of earns the moment, and it kind of quickly moves past the moment as well. It is there purely for gags, purely for visual gaggery. It's kind of like what Dante ends up taking with the sequel, A New Batch. Like A New Batch is the whole movie, in a good way though. I mean, I think Gremlins 2 is actually a really great sequel because it does something completely new. It's kind of like I guess the analogy or the parallel would be like Gremlins is Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and Gremlins 2 is Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. If you know what Tobe Hooper did with Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, he basically turned it into like a satire. Turned it into like this kind of broad comedy. So it was definitely the moment I would say, like, if it was going to break, it would be that. I don't have too much like harsh criticism. I think like the weirdest part of the movie to me, in my opinion, is the narration from the father. It bookends the movie. And I think they do that like just for the sense of like trying to make it kind of like this mythical, magical tale of Christmas. You know, it's kind of a goof on that type of approach to holiday movies. But it does seem kind of weird because he's largely absent from the story. Like, he's kind of doing his own parallel story, and he's like, there's a lot of visual gags with his inventions and whatnot, but he's not there for the vast majority of the movie. He is very much a side character. So for him to have kind of the role of the storyteller of the movie that we're watching was a little odd. Like I said, I do think it's an homage thing. I do think it's kind of a meta joke in a certain respect. So I do understand that. But when I was watching, I was like, oh, that's kind of weird. Like, I don't know. Also, I would say that it doesn't ever overstay its welcome. It almost kind of drags in the middle a little bit just because the Gremlins all kind of do variations on the same things. And that lasts for about 30 minutes of kind of gremlin mayhem before the final showdown. And it does feel like it lags a little bit because it just feels redundant at some point. But I do think overall it doesn't indulge so much that it's completely boring or completely a turnoff, in my opinion. And some of that effects work is so great. The puppeteering for the Gremlins is bar none. Like I said, it holds up to this day. Like, Gremlins is an incredibly fun watch, and you never get sucked out of it being like, oh, this is a kind of a silly movie from the 80s. It never feels like that. It feels current in a certain respect. The thing that might date it a little bit is actually that the fact that it's a little politically incorrect, rather. And it has very much an 80s kind of mentality about all this kind of stuff, about just the way people interact with each other and stuff. You know? I put on this Christmas mix. I did not realize there was going to be actual vocal arrangements. It's buzzing in my ear. I'm like, oh shit. Have we made a mistake? Did we just sabotage this whole video? I think not. But anyways, I mean, you know Gremlins. You've seen Gremlins. I assume that you probably really like Gremlins. Who doesn't? You know, if there's anybody out there that watches this that just doesn't like Gremlins, even if you hate Gremlins, if you're a Christmas Grinch, please leave a comment. I would love to hear. So I've never met anybody that like hated Gremlins. I've met people that don't have necessarily the biggest preference for it, but I don't think I've met anybody that, like, I would say hated the movie. It's kind of hard to hate it. And then it does have this great kind of heartwarming coming together at the end of the movie. I love the reveal about the Mogwai that basically the old Chinese man says he's just like, you know, humanity hasn't evolved enough to be able to interact with the Mogwai. They're not mature enough to deal with this great responsibility, this power. Like, that's kind of like the speech at the end of the movie. Always makes me kind of chuckle that the Mogwai are like the secret ancient thing that is just kind of waiting for humanity to catch up to being able to deal with it and handle it. Who doesn't like that? Who doesn't think that's fucking awesome? I do. I think it's great. What else could I say? You know, the production design on this movie is fantastic. The score. Actually, let's look at who wrote the score, because I love the score for Gremlins. It is super, super unique. Jerry Goldsmith. Oh, good old Jerry Goldsmith, huh? Has he ever let us down? Huh? Come on. He did the score for Congo and LA Confidential, which is an incredible movie. Yeah. Along Came a Spider. This is a working guy, and he does a lot of good ones, though. Air Force One? Come on. U.S. Marshals? Executive Decision? Man, this guy works. He works. But back in the day, the 70s and 80s, he was kind of a staple. Dude, he did the Oh, I thought I said RoboCop 3. He did the score for Rambo 3, which I think is probably just samples from the other Rambo movies. But yeah. Poltergeist, the Twilight Zone movie, Gremlins, Supergirl, Runaway. Great score. Great, amazing score. It's good stuff, guys. It's great stuff. All right, everybody. Well, that's just kind of my rambling spiel about Gremlins. I'm sure there's a million things I looked over. You know, I wanted to do a Zoobox Goes to the Movies about Gremlins, but I don't know if that's going to be possible. So I figured I'd just kick off this 12 days of Christmas movies with Gremlins. Why not? Do something a little left to center. Have a good time. Have fun. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for listening. If you'd like to know more about Zoobox, there's a bunch of links in the description for Facebook, for Instagram, for Twitter. Okay? There's our email addresses down there. If you want to drop us a note, drop us a Christmas note. We'll read it on our Christmas show. It'd be great. Oh, I'd love to hear about you and your Christmas traditions. How does the spirit fill you? How do you feel about it? If you'd like to make a recommendation for one of these daily videos, these semi-daily videos, or something for Zoobox Goes to the Movies, leave it in the comments. We'll put it on a list. I'll try to get, if it's a Christmas movie, I'll do everything I can to get to it before the end of the season. Okay? I promise you. All right, everybody. You have the best one ever.